From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Monday. It's good to have you, and I'm going to invite you to join in the conversation because I want some reaction. All of you, many of you who watch actually this program, very much engaged politically. We've got some very, very bright viewers and, you know, a lot happening in politics. So that's what we're going to get into. We have just wrapped up with the Republican National Convention, okay, which, if nothing else, was dramatic. And I think for many of us, very interesting to watch. And now, today, things begin with the Democratic National Convention. We now have, of course, our vice presidents in place. The candidates have chosen their vice presidential counterpart. We also have several things happening against the backdrop here. Another, you know, issue with regard to emails and what was going on, and you can thank WikiLeaks for that. Or no, well, you know, I guess it was WikiLeaks. 20,000 emails released. Hey, we're going to get into all of that. Your reaction. Not only we'll talk about the Republican, but also looking ahead to the Democrat and your feedback on it. The number 737-7587. And really, to get this started, we're going to be joined by John Weil, political science professor over at MTSU. Good to have you on, sir.
Good to be here.
You're wearing your Philadelphia tie.
I am. I usually wear it for Constitution Week, but since we're having the Democratic National Convention there, seems appropriate for that as well.
Well, ready to rock and roll. I mean, we're going to get into and maybe comparisons and how things go as the week goes along, but let's see, what to you right now as we head into the Democratic Convention is the main storyline right now? Does it anything kind of, you know, feeding off of the Republican, or do you want to talk about the leader of the DNC stepping down? What's the big story right now politically?
The story du jour is the Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigning at the end of this week, largely over this, you know, report that the emails show that the Democratic National Committee has leaned toward Hillary. Now, I think I actually have a little bit different take on this than some people. Surely some of the things that have been revealed appear to be dirty tricks kind of things, which would be unconscionable for any. On the other hand, you know, it's not very realistic, in my judgment, to expect that the leaders of the Democratic Party would favor Bernie Sanders, who only 6 months, you know, within the last year converted to the Democratic Party from the independent side. Why would you expect that they would favor him or care as much about him as someone like Hillary Clinton, who has served as a senator, secretary of state, and in all these other capacities? I mean, again, I don't favor the dirty tricks part, but she has been more loyal to the Democratic Party, and I think it's only, you know, logical that they would be more loyal to her. Now, what it opens up, of course, is, you know, where are Bernie's people going to go? And it's a, you know, it's a similar question to where are Rubio's people, where are Cruz's people, where are they going to go? And
right.
It seems pretty clear that Cruz, at least for the moment, is not leading his sheep into the Republican fold. Sanders, at least publicly, has proclaimed that he favors Hillary as opposed to Trump, and I think he's fairly sincere about it. But and particularly for younger voters who, you know, this is their first experience, there's a little bit of disillusionment, and sometimes young people are a little bit more likely to maybe to drop out than those who have experienced some of the, you know, the wounds of war and are able just simply to move on.
Yeah, I really think the essence of this, and I tend to agree with your take on that, is that they really needed her to step down. If it had been a different circumstance and maybe not someone with as much of a following as Bernie Sanders had, maybe they'd say, well, big deal, whatever, you can complain. But the bottom line on this is they need her to get out to not alienate any of Bernie Sanders' supporters. But I mean, there's just no question. I'm completely convinced that Bernie Sanders, given the choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, it's obvious that he has pretty much zero in common with Donald Trump. That's why it's baffling to me that
trade. At least that's the area that Trump is trying to emphasize.
To say that there's more similarities. But other stuff, I mean, my goodness.
No, absolutely.
My goodness. And to think that some of his supporters, I could understand, maybe feel upset, maybe choose not to vote.
Right.
But I just can't understand how a Bernie Sanders supporter could possibly say, well, he didn't get the Democratic nomination, I'm voting for Trump. I don't get that.
And you do have some third-party options for both parties. Libertarian Party has some, appeal among Republicans. The Green Party certainly has appeal among Democrats, and so I would hope that those who are disaffected will at least, the major problem for the parties, particularly the Republican Party, is that if people just stay home, it doesn't just affect who's president and vice president, it affects people running for Senate. All the members of the U.S. House of Representatives are up for election this year.
Sure.
Your gubernatorial and your state races, and so it's really important for them. I mean, frankly, it's much better for the parties if you can't vote for Hillary and you're a Democrat, they still want you to vote, and the same for Republicans. If you can't vote for Trump, they still want you there for other
all
candidates.
These other races.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this just about polls. The latest one out today shows, I think, a dead heat, 42% each, and I have a couple questions on that. One, you certainly expect the candidate whose convention just wrapped up to get a bump. That's traditionally.
There's almost always
he's gotten the bump. Hillary's turn will be next.
Yes.
So take that into account. And secondly, I've heard this, and I'm not exactly sure if it's true of all the polls I see, but my understanding is that most of these polls are being done on hard lines. They're not hitting folks with cell phones. And if that's the case, throw it out, because if it's only people with hard lines, that's eliminating a vast number of the younger voters out there who have nothing but cell phones, and they're mostly the ones voting, really, you think right now as it breaks down, for Hillary Clinton. So that's skewed. Is that true about the cell phone?
I'm not sure, but it takes us back.
Oh, if that's true, they mean nothing.
Remember,
I mean, cell phones are everything now.
In 1948, everybody's seen the headline that says Dewey defeats Truman.
Yeah.
And there was even, apparently what happened there is that the polls stopped, a month or several weeks before, but there was an earlier event in the 1930s where the pollster was predicting that Herbert Hoover was going to win, and it was actually a similar phenomenon. They were contacting people by phone, but in that day, very few people had phones.
Right.
So you're contacting the person with the phone, and that's the person in the top, 10% of the country in income.
Sure.
So, as technology changes, we have, pollsters have to change along with it.
Well, I just wonder if that's the case, and I don't know how much they're reaching out on cell phones or on regular phones, or how they do polls necessarily. Is that typically how they do it? By phone, contacting folks? Well, if it's landline and that's all they're using, then I don't even pay attention to those polls anymore.
Again,
that's ridiculous.
Remember, a nationwide poll is not necessarily as important as knowing who is ahead in Ohio, who's ahead in Florida. Does Trump have a chance of carrying Pennsylvania or Wisconsin? There are about 8 to 10 states that you could, pretty much pull out, and if you could predict, if you knew which way the majority of those were going, you could pretty much tell you who's going to be president.
Yeah. Well, okay, well, as it is, it's still early enough. I just don't buy too much into it. Okay, we're going to get to the phone line, 737-7587, but before we get to that, just your take then on the two vice presidential candidates. Of course, they're both in place now.
My view is a little bit different than some. I actually think that both are highly qualified individuals. I think Pence is a moderate conservative, which I think is a pretty good blend to have with Trump. I think that Kaine is pretty much a moderate liberal. I'm sort of pleased. I know that some African Americans will be disappointed that there's not an African American candidate, but Trump has already made a point of saying that Hillary is playing the woman card. Now he doesn't. Now it doesn't become black against white. And again, Kaine has a long record as a civil rights attorney.
Yeah.
I think either of them could become president, and in fact, I think if half of us had our druthers, we might be willing to switch both tickets and vote for the person on top rather than the person number two.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And now I'm looking forward to the debates.
Oh, it should.
We'll get into all that. And by the way, I'm looking at the list of the people, celebrities and such. There were several celebrities at
Michelle
the
is
Republican.
going to be on tonight, I think.
Is that right? Okay. And then I'm seeing Lady Gaga is going to be performing. Demi Lovato. Anyway, it's always a big show at these conventions. We'll take a break. When we come back, our phone line's open. We're going to be broad on this. If you want to touch bases, your take after the Republican convention, what you expect for the Democrats, the VPs, a question for Professor Vile. We'll be back with more right after this. Stay with us.